What's up, everybody? Today on the Sports 2.0 show, me, Aaron Yadgaroff, and Ryan Ghodsian will be talking about all NBA stuff. Want to introduce yourself, Ryan?
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Ghodsian. Nice to meet everyone. Hope we can have a good show, Aaron, huh?
I assume so. It's going to be amazing today. So the first topic we're going to be talking about today is the NBA playoffs, and mainly who's been the current player who's been the MVP of the playoffs so far. Ryan, you want to start it off?
Sure. So my take, I'm gonna try to give some context. So I'm sure most people know the Nuggets lost Jamal Murray to torn ACL late in the regular season, and a lot of experts kind of wrote them off. And Nikola Jokic just completely put the entire team on his shoulders. I mean, which he's been doing all season, but he had to carry even more of a load since Jamal Murray is out. He's averaged 31 and 10 on shooting 42% from three and 51% from the field. And honestly, it's not even just his stats. Like I don't, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever seen a player that plays at this slow of a pace, barely jumps off the ground, and completely just controls the game.
It's
Um,
beautiful. I agree.
I listen. I Before last year's bubble, I didn't really think much of him. Then I watched him in the bubble, and like, damn, this guy's impressive. In the regular season, I'm like, this guy has to be MVP, and everyone's assuming he will be. And then just when Jamal Murray went out, I thought they had no chance. And then I mean, you can argue that Damian Lillard had some better performances than Jokic, but ultimately Jokic team won. And if you look at Jokic's second best player was Michael Porter Jr., who's a great up and coming star, but then Damian Lillard had a proven guy in CJ McCollum, so with a lot more experience. So I thought it was pretty impressive what he did. Obviously, last night they didn't get the win, but I mean Denver likes being down anyway, so we'll see what happens. But so far, I gotta take the Joker. What about you, Aaron?
So yeah, Jokic is one of the guys I was thinking about since the Jamal Murray injury. He's been going insane. He's my MVP of the regular season for sure. And he has a hard matchup, DeAndre Ayton, who he said is one of the hardest defenders he's had to this whole year. He's had the most problems with him. But the person I'm going with is a little bit of surprise. I actually wrote an article about this a few days ago about six players under the age of 27 who are likely candidates to win NBA Finals MVP. And this guy was not one of the six, but Trae Young is who I'm going to be talking about actually today, who the Atlanta Hawks literally just beat the Philadelphia 76ers, who are arguably the best team in the league this year, arguably because of the Brooklyn Nets have had a lot of injuries. But yeah, Hawks just beat the 76ers. Trae Young is averaging 30 points, 3 rebounds, and almost 10 assists a game. He destroyed the New York Knicks. The bow at the end of the game showed it all. Like, he's been insane against the Knicks, and he just scored 35 points against the 76ers and showed that Ben Simmons, who could be the defensive player of the year, people are saying, might not be as good as we thought. So they got to switch up their defense a lot with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons and the 76ers, I thought the 76ers were going to sweep them, to be honest, or win in 5. But with how great Trae Young has played, it's crazy. But my original pick would have been Luka Doncic with how amazing he's been playing, but sadly,
I was actually just about to say that if they had won, I definitely would have picked him.
Yeah. And going off of what you were mentioned earlier about like Jokic playing so slow, barely get off the ground, Luka looks like he's in slow motion, but damn, the kid is always just destroying, playing well. Averages 36 points almost, 8 rebounds and 10 assists. Like, he looks like he barely missed any threes when you were watching. He shot 40% from 3, but
I agree.
He would have been my MVP pick, definitely for sure. Another one who I consider would be MVP so far is Kawhi Leonard. After that series, like the first 2 games, he started a little slow, but in total, he's averaging 32, 8, and 5 almost assists with 2.5 steals a game and shooting 61% from the field. That is like incredible. Paul George was a little slow the last 2 games, but he's playing well. He played well before, but Kawhi Leonard has definitely been the pinnacle of the team and has shown with an almost triple-double in Game 7 with 28, 10, and 9. So those Trae Young and Kawhi Leonard are most likely my 2 picks for MVP. But yeah, go back to you.
Another honorable mention in a losing effort, but I mean Damian Lillard was insane to watch. I don't think I've ever seen a better playoff performance before in that double overtime game against the Nuggets in Game 5, I believe, on the road. Yeah, it was pretty
It's game
ridiculous.
time.
I mean, it's hard not to root for the guy. I feel bad for him because he doesn't have much help around him, and even his second best player, CJ McCollum, kind of folded under pressure. But he's very impressive to watch. I mean, I hope they're a little bit better this year because I want to see him make a deep run in the playoffs. But yeah, you definitely got to throw his name in there as an honorable mention, even though you didn't win. So
For sure. But now I'm just going to talk about who I think it will be the MVP of the NBA Finals and the playoffs in general, because you have to make it to the NBA Finals, basically, to be the MVP of the playoffs. And I think we're all going to agree that Kevin Durant is most likely going to be that man. Kevin Durant's averaging 32, 8, and 3 assists per game with almost 3 blocks per game. Like, the man is insane at basketball. He's 7 foot, playing small forward, power forward, center, whatever the next put him in. Blake Griffin's been incredible for the Nets too, going back to his amazing form a few years ago, but playing more as a 3-point shooter and a big rebounding guy, actually, where he really did not average any rebounds really at Detroit. He was playing on the 3-point line always and controlling the offense, playing a little point guard in Detroit even, but now playing with Brooklyn, he's looked like his old self. So Kevin Durant, I think, is who most likely is the best chance to win Finals MVP because of the team he's on, and now that James Harden is sadly injured. I think he'll be back by the end of the series, but Kevin Durant's just incredible. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. I don't think I don't think you could ever call a Finals MVP so soon before in the playoffs. Ever really. That, in my opinion, I think this Nets team is probably the most stacked team of all time. Ranking up there right with the Warriors and the Heat. I think, honestly, if you look at their 3 biggest stars, I think that kind of outshines the Heat's biggest stars. You can make a case, obviously, LeBron is better than Durant. But if you look at the bottom 2, I mean, I love Dwayne Wade, but back then, I think Dwayne Wade was a little past his prime when they won those 2 titles. And obviously James Harden's still in his prime. And I don't think you can compare Chris Bosh to Kyrie Irving. So, yeah, I mean, you could definitely make a case for the Warriors with Durant and Curry and Klay Thompson. But, I mean, the Nets are definitely up there for sure.
I agree.
I don't see anyone beating them.
Yeah, with this 2-0 amazing start for the Nets also against the Bucks. So the Bucks looked insane against the Miami Heat, which we'll be talking about a little later. It's incredible. They just won by 25, 30 points last night against the Bucks, like without James Harden, and it's incredible. Like the Nets don't even have many great defenders to even stop Giannis. Like Bruce Brown's their best defender, who's their 6-man type guy. And he's 6'3", 6'4". He's not guarding Giannis. He's guarding Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton. But it's incredible how great of scorers and how good of rebounding. I actually thought the Nets were going to be out-rebounded heavily, but the rebounding they're doing has been incredible. So,
I agree.
And then just to talk about the Nets with the big 3, the James Harden, I thought was going to be MVP of the league once he got traded to the Nets. He was looking insane, averaged almost triple-double every game, but sadly injury came, and Jokic, who we discussed earlier, is easily the MVP of the league.
I agree.
So we could talk about our next topic, which is the biggest surprise of the NBA playoffs so far, and you can talk about that first.
Well, I think the biggest surprise team is to piggyback what you were saying earlier is probably the Atlanta Hawks. Most people, I mean, it wasn't a shoo-in that the Knicks would beat them, but most people were picking the Knicks to win. And the Hawks beat them in 5 games against a pretty raucous crowd. The Knicks haven't been to the playoffs in years, to 2013, I believe. And I don't know, I think it was caught out of left field, to be honest. I didn't see them doing this well, especially you said the game 1 against the 76ers, it kind of surprised everyone.
Huge surprise.
And if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that would be a huge step, especially in Trae Young's first ever playoffs. I mean, it's still a long way to go, but I've been very, very impressed. if I had to like say going into the season, I'd probably say like, yeah, the Hawks are probably streaking the playoffs like 7th or 8th seed, but they'll probably get bounced in the first round. But I didn't see them being a 5th seed and knocking out
Hmm.
the team in 5 games and then beating the 76ers in game 1. So that's my biggest surprise team. What about you?
Obviously, the Hawks have been the surprise of the season. Hawks and Knicks have both been the surprise of the season, getting the 4 and 5 seed. Most people had barely them making the playoffs or barely squeezing in. Definitely not the Knicks. No one expected that. Tom Thibodeau winning head coach of the year and stuff like that. But yeah, the Hawks are definitely the biggest surprise in the playoffs. Like they got Trae Young pieces around him. They got Danilo Gallinari, they got Bogdanovich, like huge players that can actually play. Like Kevin Huerter's now off the bench, like who's a great player, but wasn't starting material. DeAndre Hunter's defense insane and stuff like that. But I agree with you that they're the biggest surprise team. But I think another team we should be mentioning for sure is the Denver Nuggets. Like Denver Nuggets, like we mentioned earlier, no Jamal Murray, who arguably was the best player in the playoffs last year. Like he literally was so good in the fourth quarter and overtime in the bubble last year. Did insane work, like made so many important shots, like and how much Jokic and Michael Porter Jr., who arguably is the most improved player in the league besides Julius Randle, who helped the New York Knicks, like has been doing a lot, but like not having your starting point guard, who is a top 5 point guard, maybe you could argue these days. He's still a super young Kentucky guy. Like, is insane to me. Sorry that I keep saying insane, but it's really cool that like players could be how good they're still doing without their second star player. And every team needs at least a second star player, and that's one reason why the Knicks didn't make it out to the next round because their second best player is a 33 or whatever year old Derrick Rose is, and yeah. So, but we could also now talk about a surprise. Is there a surprise player you want to mention, or?
Um, I mean, I was gonna pick Trae Young, but we kind of talked about him at length. If I had to pick someone else, I don't know if it's a surprise, but I think Devin Booker has definitely took his game to a new level. You could argue he was the best player in that Lakers series. Pretty convincingly, he was the best player. And I'm a big Lakers fan, so it's kind of hard for me to say, but he's honestly he's a killer. I think he put a 47-point game in the closeout game in Game 6. He's just the guy's magnificent. He's improved every single year, and his first ever playoffs, he's really taking his game to the next level. And the thing I love about most of him is that he doesn't really get too high on himself, and he just threw out the defending champs in LeBron. So you got to give it to him. He's been a great. Like I said, it's not a huge surprise, but he's been playing very well.
I agree. Devin Booker and Trae Young, two future stars in the league, both huge surprises in the playoffs. I wouldn't say surprise necessarily because they're future stars, but incredible things they're doing throughout the year, throughout the season. We spoke about Trae Young. Like was never that huge on him. I think the trade
Same.
between the Mavericks and Hawks to get Doncic and Trae Young is literally the most equal trade in NBA history. I may be talking about that another time on another show or another article, but literally that is the most equal trade in NBA history. I really hope both of them can have amazing careers, which they definitely will. I think Doncic is a future MVP. I think Trae Young can potentially be a future MVP too. He's potentially the second coming of Stephen Curry, it seems like. Shoots from half court sometimes and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I agree.
We can talk about the biggest disappointment now if you want to, or unless you have another thing to talk about the surprise.
No. I was actually going to bring that up. So I think the biggest disappointment was definitely the Miami Heat. They shocked everyone last year and made an improbable run to the finals. And I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to get out of the first round, let alone, I don't think anyone picked them to get knocked down in the first round, let alone get swept. I actually, going into the series, picked the Heat to upset the Bucks, considering what I saw last year. I don't know. I was kind of shocked. I really thought Jimmy Butler was made for the moment. Maybe last year was a fluke. I thought Eric Spoelstra is a great coach. Thought he'd make some good adjustments. Tyler Hero completely disappeared. I thought he was a star in the making. I mean, who knows? He very well could be still. Bam Adebayo, top 3 center in my opinion in the NBA. He disappointed. Duncan Robinson kind of faded away. Just all their key contributors that helped them make a run last year kind of disappeared in the biggest moments. And I can't believe they didn't even get a game. Maybe if they got like a game or two, I'd pick the Lakers, but they didn't even win a game. So yeah, that's my biggest disappointment.
For sure, the Heat. As a somewhat Heat fan, you guys could see stuff. I'm a huge Dwayne Wade fan. My family is huge Dwayne Wade fans. I'm very disappointed in the Heat, but I think we have to talk about the arguable GOAT right now, and LeBron James. Like LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers losing in the first round. The champions, another team that was in the finals last year, but this time the champions of the league last year, losing in the first round. Basically, have the same team as last year, and even better, they got Montrezl Harrell, they got Andre Drummond. Like this team is arguably better than them. An older Kyle Kuzma, an older Alex Caruso, one more year in the league for them. This team should have been better and barely squeezed into the playoffs, needing to play a play-in game. Like huge disappointment for them losing to the Suns, who weren't even a playoff team last year, one of the worst teams in the league last year. They got Chris Paul, who obviously can change teams so well, like what he did with the Thunder last year, brought them to the playoffs, and look how terrible the Thunder are doing right now. Like Chris Paul is insane at basketball, has shown his quality and how good he has been for them. But the Lakers, oh my God, like crazy stuff how they lose in the first round. I think this shows another reason people are going to complain about LeBron not being the GOAT and stuff, which we're not talking about today, but yeah.
I agree. It was a big disappointment, especially as a Lakers fan. One thing I will say though, that the reason I picked the Heat over the Lakers is because Anthony Davis was injured pretty much all series, which obviously I still think the Lakers still were supposed to win, but I think that kind of propelled me to pick the Heat over the Lakers, especially since the Heat got swept. But yeah, I was definitely surprised.
So yeah, I'm gonna talk about my biggest disappointed player for now. I don't know if hopefully we don't have the same one, but Julius Randle is mine. I think that's everyone's biggest disappointment in the playoffs. Like the most improved player this year, shooting 6 for 23 game 1, 5 for 16 game 2, 2 for 15 in game 3, and 7 for 19 in game 4. Like that's not great stats for a player who literally carried this New York Knicks team throughout the season, was an all-star player. He had an amazing regular season, the most improved player in the league. But after this playoffs appearances and how poor he did and the New York Knicks did, I think that it showed that he's not ready for the big moments, and huge disappointment. He choked a lot.
That was definitely my pick. You took my argument right out of my mouth. But just to piggyback off what you were saying, he went from averaging 24 and 10 in a regular season while shooting 45% to 18 and 10 in the playoffs. But he shot, let's see what he shot. He shot 29% from the field, which is mind-boggling.
For a big man as well, too.
Exactly, yeah, and
he also averaged 6 assists in the regular season. He was getting good amount of triple doubles throughout the year, and like in the final game they lost, the game 5, he had 3 assists. Like he's our number one option, stuff like that, but he's got to get his teammates more involved. I know his teammates were missing shots as well, but getting players like Julius Randle is a great 3-point, or not Julius Randle, Reggie Bullock is a great 3-point shooter. Obi Toppin, who's an athlete, Derrick Rose, who can create his own shot well, not as good as he used to be speed-wise. But yeah, it's still a very successful season for the New York Knicks and a successful season for Julius Randle. But by how great Julius Randle played in the regular season and how great the New York Knicks played and how great they were coached by Tom Thibodeau, everyone expected more, and definitely not a 5-game loss to Atlanta Hawks.
I agree. I think it was honestly just by watching the game that I think the moment was just too big for him. It was his first time in the playoffs, Madison Square Garden. Everyone's lots of pressure, and Trae Young lived up to the pressure and kind of took that enemy role and Julius Randle kind of folded. I also think he didn't let the game come to him. He was kind of pushing too hard. So that's probably maybe why he played a little worse. I think, though, in general, this kind of says something about Randle. Great player, don't get me wrong. Do not believe he's a first option on the championship team.
Was about to say that. I think that's the same argument with Giannis, though. You can keep going. I'll mention that later, but yeah, keep going.
I was going to say definitely not a number one option as of now. And he still has to prove that he could be a viable number two option as on a championship team. So he has a lot to prove. Great season overall. I think he made obvious most improved player of the year. But he's got a lot of proving to do next year in the playoffs. I mean, I think we're going to expect some big numbers again in the regular season, but we got to see what he does in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Knicks need to go for another star quality player. Try to get Bradley Beal if they can. Seems like he's enjoying his time now in Washington after the turnaround they had. But try to get a big number player. Dame Lillard, I don't think he'll leave Portland, but like try to get a huge all-star to get players alongside him. But I think I'm just going to talk about the Giannis thing. Everyone talked about Giannis really isn't a number one option late in the game. He's not that guy who'll create his own shot and stuff like that. I think it's the same thing with Julius Randle. So I think, like we mentioned, Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, a lot of good players, guards mainly. I think they need. Drew Holiday's been good, but he's not a closer. He's an amazing defender. I'd say an A-tier defender in the league, and like can create his own shot, but they need another amazing player who can create their own shot. And I think the biggest disappointment of the whole playoff so far is the toxicity of the fans at games. For example, the spitting at Madison Square Garden on Trae Young, terrible thing. Spitting on someone is one of the worst things you could do to an individual. Like it literally shows hatred and stuff. That's a thing that happened in like 1800s, early 1900s to people that you hate. It's not going to go well in this time at all because of cameras and stuff like that. You're going to get banned from the stadium, which obviously happened. There's a situation in game 2, I think it was of the Sixers-Wizards games, where Westbrook went out with injury and then a fan dumped a bunch of popcorn on his head and stuff like that. Like, I think it was a young fan and stuff, but you cannot do that. The same thing happened at Jazz games where their toxic fans were being racist and stuff to Grizzlies fans. Thankfully, it got better. Ja Morant's dad befriended some players, fans of the Jazz game, and posted like that they were amazing people and stuff like that. So there's obviously some amazing fans and some terrible fans, but we got to make sure players are super important for the sport. Don't make them angry. Do not spit on them. Do not throw popcorn at them. Do not throw anything at them. There's been situations like this in other sports. Make sure you're chanting correct things, nothing hateful and stuff like that.
I agree. There's definitely a point where fans can cross the line when you're throwing objects at players or you're spitting on them. I just honestly, it's not an excuse, but I just think that like teams like the Knicks, for example, had nothing to cheer for years, and they're all riled up and they'll literally do anything they can to try to distract him. I think it's obviously terrible what that fan did. But in general, just New Yorkers had a tendency to be a little crazy anyway. So I'm not totally surprised, even though it was pretty sad to see. One thing I will mention, though, is it's part of, like I said, there's a point where we cross the line. But up until that point, I think chants, for example, as long as you're not saying anything personal, I think it's part of the game, like chanting like, yeah, you suck, or I don't know, just anything that's not on a personal level. You can
nothing racist, nothing belligerent, stuff like that.
Exactly. I mean, that's what has made the playoffs so great over the years. It's all the fans yelling and screaming and making noise, and then the biggest stars like silencing them, like Trae Young, for example, or like Kobe in the playoffs back in the day. So I mean, yes, I'd love to see. I'd never want to see what I saw happen in terms of spitting and throwing objects, but I do love the intensity of the playoffs. And I think obviously, especially since the fans are back in attendance, they didn't know really what it was like to be back in the stands, and they kind of got carried away. But so many players are talking about, like Devin Booker last night, for example, explaining how big of a help the crowd gave the team.
For sure.
So, and Chris Paul, and so it's just, I mean, it's great to see the intensity of the fans, as long as they don't cross the line. And it's also another thing to mention, the remaining teams left in the playoffs haven't won a title since the 1980s, I believe. I think it's 76ers.
Wow.
So that's a pretty amazing feat. The NBA is getting some new teams rise up, so I think that's great for the league. That also could add to why some of these fans are going crazy, because they've never made it to this point before. And besides the Nets, I think it's pretty wide open. So I mean, like, look at the team for like the Hawks. If they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, that would make their entire decade as a Hawks fan. If a team like the Jazz or the Nuggets make it, or even the Clippers make it to if the Clippers make it to the Western Conference Finals, you have to view that as a success. They've never made it before. If the Nuggets or the Jazz make it to the finals, that's pretty amazing too. So I mean, all these teams, especially in the West, look at the Suns. They haven't made the Western Finals in 10 years. They've been doing some great things in the playoffs. If they make it to the final, I mean, just all these fan bases it's great to see they're kind of rallying around their entire team. There hasn't been much to cheer for many of these teams. So it's great to see.
Yeah, just to finish up here, I think it's just a PSA. We got to say, make sure if you go to an event, a sporting event, any type of event, even in public, make sure you just don't be a fool. Don't get yourself in a fight. Don't say anything stupid. Like, if you're a fan, obviously you could like say some negative stuff to players, but don't like say anything racist, belligerent. Like, make sure everything is good and have a fun time. Make sure the players are having a fun time, and yeah.
One more topic I wanted to throw in there, if you don't mind. Of the remaining playoff teams, which coach do you think is under the most pressure?
Ooh, I think it's easy to say Steve Nash. It's his first year as a head coach. Future, or is he? He's a Hall of Famer. I think already. I was about to say future Hall of Famer. Like, one of the best point guards of all time. Has 3 top. You could argue top 7 players in the league, top 10 players in the league. Like, he's definitely under the most pressure because now without LeBron James, no Steph Curry in the playoffs, you have the best player in the league, Kevin Durant, when healthy, and he is healthy right now. And having James Harden, who's arguably the second best player in the league when healthy, like, Steve Nash is the coach with the most pressure right now.
Interesting. Didn't even think of Nash. When I think of pressure, I think about like being on the hot seat and losing your job, and previous failures. Like, Steve Nash obviously has a stacked team, but this is his first year coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it would be a huge disappointment if he loses in the finals, but I don't think he's losing his job. Mike Budenholzer, on the other hand, I think you could easily lose his job, especially if this is ending well for the Bucks. He was on the hot seat last year, lost in the first round as a first seed. Wait, were the Bucks a first or second seed last year?
They were 1 or 2 seed, but they lost second round to the Heat.
Yeah, a second round. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, he great in the regular season, racks up all the wins, and then folds in the playoffs, and it's just become a trend. And I don't see how the Bucks can keep Budenholzer after disappointing year, time and time again. That's my pick. I don't know what you think.
I agree with that. Like, having the 2-time MVP of the league the last 2 seasons with Giannis Antetokounmpo and not making it even to a conference finals, like, is definitely like something that you can get fired off of. But as I mentioned earlier, Giannis is definitely not a closer. He's an amazing player, one of the most athletic guys. He's a freak, as his nickname, the Greek Freak. But Mike Budenholzer's job will definitely be under pressure. I don't see him getting fired, but yeah, I think I totally agree with that statement.
I actually would not be completely surprised if he got fired.
I wouldn't be shocked, but yeah.
I think he's actually, out of all the coaches, he's the most likely to get fired.
Of the teams remaining, I agree, yeah.
I mean, you don't want to see anyone lose their job, but if I had to pick one, I'd definitely pick them. And, I mean, just a second second coaches to pick. Not even about him being on the hot seat, but just his legacy as a coach. I think Doc Rivers is actually a lot under fire. Didn't get it done with the Clippers. Obviously, he was a champion with the Celtics, but
He's known for
he's
known for crashing out in the playoffs.
Exactly. I mean, I think his time as like a glory coach with all the fame and stuff with the Celtics kind of dwindled away, and he hasn't really adapted to the league. For example, he just let Trae Young destroy them. I mean, obviously Trae Young's a great player, but you got to put your best defenders on them, like Simmons or Thibault. And he didn't figure that out until the second half when they made a run. But matchups aside, he's got to get it done. If the Sixers don't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and win a game or two, that would be a big disappointment considering how great of a regular season they had.
I agree. I don't think he'll be fired at any cost, but like it's going to be a huge disappointment if they lose this series. Like as I mentioned earlier, I expected a sweep. I expected maybe 5 games max in this series, but yeah.
I think it's more so of his legacy more than him being on the hot seat.
All right, I think that's all we got for today. Thank you everyone for whoever tuned in today for the Sports 2.0 show. It means a lot. I had a great time talking with Ryan today about all NBA playoffs. Subscribe to the channel if you're not here. Like the Facebook page, everything. Thank you everyone for being here, and see you guys later.